Hello and welcome to the Discover History YouTube channel, and tonight we're going to continue with our theme of Armed Forces Week. The week runs all the way through until Saturday, and Saturday is the culmination of the week's celebrations, and it ends with Armed Forces Day. Unfortunately, we won't be working anywhere on Armed Forces Day, whereas usually we're out and about doing things with the Royal British Legion and all the veterans societies, basically. We're usually over at Malvern for their big event, but like I said, due to COVID-19 restrictions, we won't be there this year. So we're running the whole week dedicated to Britain's armed forces. A big thank you for all the work they actually do. It's not always fighting, it's obviously working with the NHS, and it's keeping our skies clear in the case of the Royal Air Force. So tonight I'm taking over from Ian. Ian did a very good video all about diet or food in Nelson's Navy, and hopefully you've had a go at the ship's biscuits that he mentioned. Just to go over the recipe, all it is, very simple, even I could do it. It's literally flour, water and maybe a pinch of salt for taste, and you need to bake them nice and hard to stop those weevils getting in. However, we will warn you, don't eat them as they are. Please soak them in water, milk, whatever you want. If alcohol takes your fancy, or just coffee, get the biscuits in there, soak them for some time, soften them up, and then let us know how you got on. Anyway, we've been alternating, myself and Ian, all week, and we've been also mixing it up, as in we did Army on Monday, Tuesday was Royal Navy, and tonight I'm going to talk about the RAF, and then Ian will take over tomorrow, and then I will come back as well. So we're alternating it, making sure we're covering the three armed forces: the Army, the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force. So tonight what I want to talk about is the flying helmet as used by Bomber Command during the Second World War. However, before I show you my flying helmet that I wear, I'd like to bring your attention to two very good books that I would highly recommend. As you can probably imagine, because I constantly use books, we've got a huge library in the Discover History headquarters. We've got books on pretty much everything from underwear to, believe it or not, Worcestershire toilets, in other words Worcestershire privies. Google it, by the way, there is a book called Worcestershire privies. And tonight I want to draw your attention to these two books because they are absolutely fantastic. They are full of information. I got those probably about 5, maybe 6 years ago, and they're full of all sorts of information. The one that I want to draw your attention to is the white covered one, because it actually covers the flying clothing that is worn by the Royal Air Force and also the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. And as you can see in this chapter, we're talking about flying helmets, and they are quite interesting because if you think back to the Royal Flying Corps and the Royal Navy Air Service, and the flying helmets were usually civilian ones for a very, very long time, because you have to remember flight hadn't been going that long when those two units had formed. In 1918 they combined the two together to create what we now know as the Royal Air Force, strangely on the 1st of April, April Fool's Day 1918, and from that a lot of standardization came in and a lot of new equipment. And if you think back to one of the videos I did, probably last month I think it was about the life preserver, the famous iconic Mae West, for example, and we looked at the late war one when they painted it yellow. Well, this book covers that in there, but I'd like to draw your attention to these early ones. These are 1930s ones, hopefully you can see them from there, and they're very basic things. They are leather, often with chamois leather on the inside to make it comfortable. And in the early ones there was no real connectors for anything, for example the intercom system on an aircraft or talking to base or anything like that. They were literally a leather skull cap, and it's really a hang up from those early days of the Royal Flying Corps and the Royal Navy Air Service. Here we have some later ones. I say later ones, these are when the war is going in 1940. So these are the sort of things that were worn by the pilots, for example, that won the Battle of Britain for us. That's the celebrations of that is coming up, and we may actually do a series of videos just on the Battle of Britain, comparing the different aircraft and the different troops that were involved in that. And then we come up to the more modern ones, and I say modern ones because really we're talking about the ones that were used midway during the war and towards the end of the war. And I have a Type C helmet which was introduced in 1941. But when you get a helmet, they have all sorts of things attached to it. Now I'm going to quickly take them off and we'll talk about each thing in turn. Now the goggles, for example, are buckled onto the flying helmet. They're also press-studded on to the flying helmet. So I'm going to just take those off for a moment. I'll talk about the goggles separately to the rest of it. We've also got attached to it an oxygen mask. Well, I'm going to take that off as well because we'll talk about that separately. And they are press-studded on and also clipped on. And then what we should end up with, once I've deconnected everything, is this, our standard 1941 pattern flying helmet. Once again, leather on the outside, dark leather on the outside, and inside we've got the chamois leather, which is designed to make it comfortable. Now these helmets, it's a strange name really because they don't really give protection to the head as such. I suppose it will give protection to the odd knock on the head, so it's not actually touching the actual your actual skull or the skin or your scalp. They do keep your head warm, and that's really important because what you have to remember is in some of the big bombers, for example, they were flying at a huge high altitude, which meant that the temperatures were down to minus even 20-30 degrees if not more, and lots of things were freezing up. If you touch metalwork at that altitude, you would literally stick to it. You peel your hand away from your gun and you will literally peel your skin off. Absolutely horrible, and it was very uncomfortable at those temperatures. One of the reasons why they did get flasks and luckily electrical heated suits as the war went on. So the leather hat is quite important because there are a number of things attached to it, as I said. These are the earpieces where you actually have little speakers, the intercom, so the pilot or any of the crew really, if we're talking about a bomber, will be able to listen in to what everyone's saying. So they can listen in to where enemy aircraft, bandits at 2 o'clock, that sort of thing. It's also useful because they will be able to be told specific things, whereabouts they are, when it is time to relax, for example, when it's time to be alert. And interesting fact, a lot of the rear gunners on the journey out were often used, especially when they were flying in formation, to ensure that they kept a lookout to make sure no friendly aircraft actually bumped into them. They often flew in very tight formations. So that is the flying helmet. That's what I wanted to talk about, the Type C flying helmet as used by the RAF. We do have here a plug, and that was so he could plug in to the intercom on the aircraft. So he has to plug this in, quite a large socket as you can see. They were usually coiled up in that fashion. Mine's not very neat, to be fair. If you look at some of the photographs, they do it really, really well, nice and tight. I'll get told off for having one like that really, but it makes it shorter. So that's the flying helmet. Now, as I mentioned, there are a number of straps on this. So you have at the back here a little buckle and 2 little press studs. That's actually there to hold the goggles in place, and they're the goggles that I wear when I'm representing, for example, Bomber Command, and these are actually Mark 8 goggles. Now that book will tell you there was lots of different types. The Mark 8 ones were actually more comfortable. They were very soft leather, and they're also relatively lighter than all the other goggles. And you have the glass in them, the toughened glass in them, actually split, and that enables them to sit very closely around your eye and give you good peripheral vision from the side. Now, when I represent a bomber command, for example, I generally represent a rear gunner or an air gunner. And the goggles were very important because should your turret get damaged, or maybe you're in a turret or a gun position on an aircraft which had no glazing in it, some didn't, you would struggle at high altitude in cold temperatures to be able to actually see. And you've only got to go out in very, very cold weather and you'll know what I mean. You can almost feel that your eyelids are actually cold, very, very cold. So very important. And they give a bit of protection as well from any debris that might be flying around. So the goggles sit usually on top of the flying helmet and they can be brought down over the face. You've then got the oxygen mask, and there was a lot of different types of these. This is the later oxygen mask, the late war oxygen mask, and because you have the intercom, you need to be able to speak as well. It's not just a case of listening in. Then you plug in to the headset, to the actual helmet, and there is at the front here a little switch that switches between off and on, so that will enable you to talk, and then you switch it off afterwards once you finish talking. If you leave it on, everyone can hear absolutely everything that you're saying. You also have running down the front here, which is why it is used or why it is carried, this is your oxygen tube, and this was designed to either plug in to the oxygen supply of the aircraft, or you could actually carry a smaller canister that was a mobile canister, so you can actually walk about on the plane, on the aircraft, with it attached to you, and that's the reason why you've got the clip on it just there. Now that was very important because at around about 10,000 feet, you would definitely need oxygen. There is no way you could operate effectively and safely without oxygen. Saying that, we do know some of the biplanes in the Great War, flown by even the Royal Navy Air Service, but mainly by the Royal Flying Corps, often went to such mad altitudes, and pilots often blacked out because of the lack of oxygen. And some of them did come round, I will say. They didn't all die and crash their aircraft. But to make things safer and for you to work effectively and stay on the edge to see those enemy aircraft, at around about 10,000 feet, you would definitely have to put the oxygen on. Because your intercom system is attached to the oxygen mask, you do see a lot of photographs with the oxygen mask permanently worn, even though they're not at 10,000 feet or above. So today I wanted to just celebrate the armed forces, the Royal Air Force in particular, which hasn't been around that long technically, 1918 if you're talking about the Royal Air Force. But remember, we're celebrating the Army, the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force, and tonight I wanted to look just at the helmet, the flying helmet that was worn at the time. Now tomorrow Ian will be back and he will actually be taking on an RAF themed video, and then we go back to me, and remember we're covering those three arms, the Army, the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force. So on that note, tune in tomorrow, make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.